All right, guys, this will be episode 5 of Noob to Noob. This one's going to be a little bit different. I'm shooting this on my phone, which is not typical. Typically, I'm shooting on the GoPro when I can use my hands and get a real example of exactly what I'm talking about here. But this is just going to be a really brief, quick video that explains a little bit about what I did while installing the belt drive onto my Castle 2028 800 kV. I did something, and I don't see many guides for doing it, and it just worked out really well for me, and I think the install went great. Now, I pulled it obviously apart for this video, but that's okay, because my goal is to help others out there. And you'll see a lot of people that say installing your belt drive is a little bit tedious, it's daunting, it's harder to get right than just normal gears as far as mesh is concerned. And that may be true, but I think the way that I did it actually made it fairly simple. So I'm running a 25 to 25 ratio. So that means my Spur and my pinion are both 25s, because I'm running 1-to-1 on an 800 kV. And as you can see, both my setups are going to have, like my motor and my XLX2 have dual 40 millimeter fans. I'm not going to have an overheating issue. Those are up to 26,000 RPM. They're going to keep things pretty cool. So to hop into it, what I did to get this the way that it was, well, the way that it is, when I put the Spur gear on first, and I put the hot racing gear cover on it so it held it down, right? So I could hold some tension up on the motor, and kind of play with the with the belt tension. But when I put in and I'll turn on the flash here to see. When I put on the Spur gear, I just kind of split the difference in the housing between the hot racing gear cover and the front of the housing where this goes. And as you can see, this place here, the clearance between these two places and the clearance between these two places is pretty similar, right? Because I just wanted to get a baseline, and I wanted to have at least one fixed object to work off of, and that's what I did. So I put that in, and at first I didn't put my set screws in. You can see this little bit of blue residue. That's another thing that I'll get into in a minute. That's a little bit different than what some people do, but in my experience, it works great. So Spur gear is on. Then what I did is your WFO engine mount, or whatever engine mount you have, obviously has the slidable washers, so you can move the engine up and down. I keep saying engine, motor up and down. So what I did when I got the motor in here, like so, I slipped the belt on to the pinion with the motor completely loose and just the pinion on the shaft. And what I did was I just put a little mark, like the tiniest little mark, where the bolts were going to go when I had the belt tension where I wanted it. Some people get into like turning the bolt with the wrench while it's on here, and that just seemed a bit much to me, and I thought it just seemed a little bit unnecessary, because if this was loose, when I already had my Spur gear fixed, I can tell where this was going to be to achieve the proper mesh with the belt. Pretty simply, actually. So I marked the bolts where I was going to put them in for the final motor mount spot, and put everything together, and it worked out pretty well. And I'll show you what my tension is. I'm just gonna slip that, push that back. So there's the tension that I have set. And I have experience with belts on other things. There is no way that this is too tight. I know that to be a fact. It's has good rolling You know, it rotates fairly freely. There's not a ton of tension there. Works out well. And I know for a fact that it's not too loose, because it is surely not slipping. I mean, there's no way that this belt is going to slip. As you can see, no matter how hard I pull on it, I can't even get it off of the first tooth of contact on the top of the pinion. So in my opinion, no pun intended, opinion, I think this tension on the belt and the mesh on the belt system worked out really well. So moral of the story, guys, in my opinion, and I'm sure I'll get blasted on here for people who from people who disagree. As I said before, I set the spur first, just centered it in the housing, right? Got myself a 0, cranked down the gear cover. So I had a fixed point of reference. Then I knew by that position that this was going to have to be pretty far back. Now, knowing that you have the bolts to contend with, I put this pinion all the way back on the motor shaft, so it just barely cleared these bolts. So it's not touching the bolts at all, but it is close, right? It's very close, which is okay. You just don't want any rubbing resistance. And this keeps unfocusing. So I put this pinion back so it just clears the bolt heads for the mount. I manually checked where I knew I was going to mount it based on the tension of just playing with it with no bolts in it at all. I just had the pinion on the shaft of the motor, and then just set my bolts. And I did have to move them once by a smidge. I mean the tiniest of smidges. I just wanted the tension a tiny bit looser than where I had it set in the first time. But it was a matter of taking this out, which takes 2 seconds, loosening the bolts, and bumping it down, just like a tad. I just tapped it down, and it worked out great. As far as the set screws are concerned, I mentioned before, you can see the blue residue in here. One great thing with grub screws and set screws, and I'm a fan of Loctite, don't get me wrong, I do use blue Loctite. In my experience, in all the set screws I've ever set, and I don't know if anybody else does this because I can't say I've ever read it anywhere. In my opinion, what's as good as anything is a good roll of thread tape. It works amazing. I've never had a grub screw come out of anything when I wrap in a good thread tape. And this Blue Monster is the shiz. All right, this stuff is really good. I'm not saying Loctite won't work. It may. But you also read a lot about people having blue Loctite grub screws come loose. For me, I've never had one come loose with this. Is somebody definitely going to have one come loose with something like this on it? Probably. But in my opinion, this is just as good as blue Loctite. And it's much easier to deal with. And it's simple. And it's mess-free. And I think you guys would all be extremely surprised at how well good thread tape works. So anyways, 25-25 belt drive mounted up onto the Castle 2028. Gear covers there. This has been a little bit of a rambling video. Hopefully it provided a little bit of perspective for you guys that are doing belts that are a little bit worried about getting it set up. It's really much more simple than some folks make it out to be. So that is it on this one. Quabam! Please like and subscribe. I know it's a cluttered mess down here. It's going to get better very soon. Like and subscribe. Graphic going up. And this is it for this video. And I will have a couple more coming soon. Obviously, I just did also my dual fan shroud onto the XLX2 with the integrated switch mount. So I think I'm going to make a quick video on how I mounted that switch to its location. But anyways, guys, have a wonderful night. Thanks a lot. And You know what it is. See ya!